presentation, isn't it? If you look at the finest restaurants, they spend a great deal of time working on presentation. I had to search quite a while to find a picture of a meal prepared that actually had some meat in it. That was the only thing. I don't know what it is. I've gone to a lot of those restaurants too. It doesn't seem, in fact, I remember one time, I'd never heard of before. I've since learned. Medallions, y'all know medallion? Now, for a boy from Texas, it's just not a lot of meat, you know. But it was presented very well. Presented very, very well. Think of all that had gone into this presentation. Think of all that had gone into it. Not just the colt provided to the disciples, the master's suggestion, just tell them the master has need of this. Not just the cloaks and the palm branches laid in front of Jesus for him and the colt, the donkey to trot on as they processed into Jerusalem. No, think of all that was involved in the preparation. We've been talking about the covenant. We've been talking about how Jesus reworks covenant, offers a new covenant. Think of Abram carrying Isaac up to the altar, laying him there, preparing to plunge his knife into his son. Think of the fact that that is probably fairly symbolic of what the penalty ought to be for your sin and for mine. Think of how Jesus now takes that place. Presentation, it's all about presentation. And Jesus was presented for the people. You must have known, if you were in Jerusalem at that time, you must have known that there was something going on. Part of the presentation, part of the leading up to this event was Lazarus' death. And not only his death, but his resurrection. Talk about some controversy. This beats a three-point shot at the buzzer, all to pieces. By the way, my condolences to Notre Dame. Presentation. God is concerned to present to His people covenant, promise, in a way that they will receive it, in a way that we will receive it, in a way that we can understand it. He puts all of the background together. All of the Old Testament together. Some people have asked, well, why didn't we just have Jesus come at the first? Why do we have to go through all of that Old Testament stuff? All those people wiping out the complete, number of the people that oppose them. All of those lambs being slaughtered. All of that blood being spilled. Why do we have to go through all of that to get to this? That's presentation, isn't it? It's important for us, and I think it's actually a temptation on this side of Jesus to kind of forget what it cost. To forget what Jesus' death really did. the people shouted, "Hosanna!" They wanted it to be a quick victory and a quick victory lap in celebration. And then they wanted Jesus just to win the day against all their enemies where they could enjoy all the freedom. It didn't work that way then. It generally doesn't work that way now. Jesus wins a victory, but there's still much to be done. Presentation. There was glorious entry. It was a kingly entry. It was one that had been prophesied. It was one that had been looked for. That's why the people talked about the ancestor of David. They saw this as a crystallizing moment in the ministry of Jesus. They thought this was going to be the wave that he would ride all the way to the consummate victory over the Romans. They weren't really worried about the high priest. But the real enemy, it turns out, was the high priest. It was a glorious entry. On the evening of April 13th, 1970, Apollo 13 was on its mission to the moon. When the crew was 200,000 miles from Earth and closing in on the moon, Mission Controller Cy Liebergott saw the low-pressure warning signal on a hydrogen tank in Odyssey. Alarm lights lit up in Odyssey and in Mission Control as oxygen pressure fell and power disappeared. The crew notified Mission Control with, "Houston, we have a problem." For re-entry to the Earth's atmosphere, there would be a blackout period lasting a few minutes. During the silence, Mission Control petitioned, "Apollo 13, this is Houston. Do you read me? Apollo 13, this is Houston. Do you read me? Apollo 13, this is Houston. Do you read me?" The Apollo 13 blackout lasted only a few minutes. Imagine 400 years of silence. Then the silence was broken. At the right time, God brought forth His Son, born of a woman, and fulfilling all of the promises and prophecies. For unto us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government shall be upon His shoulders, and His name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. They waited. Sometimes we too wait for God's entry, for God's announcement, for God's peace to come to us. Glorious entry. Then also there was a premonition. Mark's passage is a very interesting passage because really of the way that it concludes. Jesus goes to the temple courts, and there's not much activity going on there. And He looks around, it says, and then He departs. I just wonder, what was Jesus thinking about whenever He looked around the temple courts? Was He thinking about what had gone on before in the temple? Was He thinking about the dedication of the temple? Was He thinking about Solomon's temple? Or was He thinking about Herod's temple? Was He thinking about all of the worship that had gone on through the years, all of the sacrifices that had been brought to this place, and how He was going to culminate all of them in the greatest sacrifice of all time? had some premonition, some sense of his impending death, some sense of what lay before him that week and the challenges that would come to him in the temple. And the fact that the temple was supposed to be a place of great activity, a place of worship, a place where God would be honored above all. And here he was, Son of God, and there weren't many folks around. Father passed by his son's bedroom and was astonished to see the bed neat, nicely made up and everything neat and tidy. Then he saw an envelope propped up on the pillow. It was addressed, Dad, with the worst premonition. He opened the envelope and read the letter with trembling hands. Dear Dad, it is with great regret and sorrow that I am writing to you. I had to elope with my new girlfriend because I wanted to avoid a scene with your mom. I've been finding real passion with Joan, and she's so nice. I knew you would not approve her because of all of her piercings, tattoos, tight motorcycle clothes, and the fact that she is so much older than I am. It's not just her passion, Dad. She really gets me. Joan says that we're going to be very happy. She owns a trailer in the woods and has a stack of firewood, just enough for the whole winter. We share a dream of having many children. Please don't worry, Dad. I'm 15 and I know how to take care of myself. I'm sure that we'll be back to visit someday so that you can get to know your grandchildren. Your son, Chad. P.S. Dad, none of the above is true. I'm over at Tommy's house. I just wanted to remind you that there are worse things in life than the report card. I love you. Call when it's safe for me to come home. Premonition. Premonition. Jesus, I think, knows. Have you ever been in a place where you just knew? You just knew something was going to happen. Maybe it was something good, something happy. Maybe you knew that it was something tragic, something abysmal. But you just knew. Jesus knew. And he didn't avoid it. He didn't try to maneuver away from it. He walked straight toward it. For you and for me. Premonition. And then salvation comes. Hosanna. God save us. Now there are two parts to that. The first part is God. The second part is save us. Generally speaking, we have an idea of what we want to be saved from, and we have an idea about how we want to be saved. And we want to be saved sometimes just to this point and no further. We want to give God just this part of our life, but not the whole thing. We want it to come in the way that we want it to come. But the problem with that attitude is the first part. God. It's God's business how he saves us. It's God's business, really, what he does with us after he has saved us. That's the part I really have difficulty with. Because he may put me in a place that is unlike what I expected.